but it was okay, you're recording. I thought you went ahead and kicked me off. I was like, dang, I didn't think I did that bad yet.
Sorry.
I'm just going to say you got it. Okay. So I say all that to say this. There was one piece there that Abby, the presenter, said, and we learned real quick, we've got to be healthy ourselves before we can be what our kids need us to be. And so we were kind of learning on the fly because we had a lot of babies come through. And unfortunately, in foster care, we just kept getting calls that, hey, we need to place. And so we would have 2 or 3 kids at a time on top of our 2 biological kids, and really not a lot of training as far as going through the foster care program of how to actually manage doctor appointments and so on and so forth. So that's where I knew real quick. I was like, all right, my wife is going through, because I went to work every day. She took care of this stuff and she was struggling. So what we did start out with, so we could be healthy for all of us, is we created our own little calendar of, here's doctor appointments, here is what we have to do for the children that are in our home, and kind of went that route for creating just that. So we knew every week what we were getting into. And then we also had a separate calendar with, because our biological kids were involved in activities, and we had to, and again, we had babies that we were bringing into our home, so they weren't involved in activities at that time. So that was how we did that as well. That helped us. So we're going to talk about some specific stuff, but I'll just tell you the 2 things that helped us the most were getting a calendar that we could actually put and see, and every day discussing how we were going to get that accomplished. And then the second thing is come up with a filing system that we could actually put the paperwork, which is absurdly overwhelming, but it is what it is. So we had to figure out how to deal with it. And for us, we use kind of an accordion style with tabs and stuff like that. What I'll tell you is not a good process, because we tried it, is just putting all the paperwork on a table and then kind of sorting through it as you got to it. That didn't work real well for us, nor does it normally work very well. So we actually had to come with a detailed system to where we could provide for, okay, sorry, I thought somebody was asking a question. So that we could provide what we needed. And to this material's point, a lot of the material, or excuse me, the information we needed was repetitive. So once we had it in a filing system, we were able to pull from it and take that to a new doctor's appointment or a dentist or whatever. Well, not necessarily a dentist at that age, and go from there. So long story short, those were the 2 biggest things that helped us survive as we were going through it initially, and then get to a place where I don't know that you ever get great at it, but at least you feel like you have your arms wrapped around it. And I'll go back to what I initially said. A big point of it is we had to get ourselves healthy too. I think we all have hearts where we're loving these kids and we're all in, but if we're not taking care of ourselves and doing things to help ourselves be able to go, hey, this is a really good system, at times we might not be providing for them as well as we need to. So that's what we learned. So what we're talking about tonight, I've been right there. If you're there right now, I've been there in your shoes. I wanted you to hear that from me, because we had to learn, and it was a very difficult time in our life, but it's one we were so thankful for, because it was a very, very big blessing for us, and especially a lot of kids we got to be with. So questions with anything so far? Anybody want to add anything? Okay. I don't know if this is true. Do we know if everybody has a folder that they've received? We got 1 thumbs up.
Everyone should have received their folder that's
Perfect.
on tonight.
Sí, hoy me llegó.
Okay. So if everybody will turn to the document that says file categories, I'm going to speak off of that for a little bit. And this is where literally you need to ask questions, or, oh, there we go. Look at that. I didn't even know we could do that. So I'm so excited. Thank you. All right. So I don't like reading to people, but we will go by a bullet point just because that's how my notes kind of track with it as well. So I don't care what area of life you're in, or what phase of life, season of life, however you want to put it, whether it's just out of college or now having children, so on and so forth. If you don't start with your budget, you're going to have problems, right? So unfortunately, we live in a country that we see our government spend more than they actually have. Not the best example, okay? We can't do that as ourselves in our personal budgets because we can't print money. So I always tell people the best thing to do if you don't have one already is literally start with your budget. Because the only way to get organized, if you think about it, how can I get organized on something I don't know the facts about? So we got to start with, when it comes to finances, hey, how much money do I have coming in? Whatever all the sources are, and we'll talk about that. And then how much is either left over or is there a shortfall? If there is, what do I got to do to try to bridge that gap? And so that is because there's the second bullet there is within spending plan is talking about saving tips. That's when you're going to know where you're really at, right? Is take a monthly budget and go, hey, this is either a surplus, extra money, or, man, I'm in a situation I got to figure out where to generate some more money, either an extra job or whatever, and so on and so forth. So that's probably the biggest thing on here that you got to start with, and that's why I'm glad it's number one. I will say this, I'll go to, because even where did I put that? Talking about debt and stuff down this spending plan. If anybody knows who Dave Ramsey is, okay, Larry Burkett, these are guys that are basically been financial planners and financial consultants on a national level. But Dave Ramsey and Larry Burkett both spoke to having a cash model that they use, or a cash envelope. And so for people that are trying to formalize a budget, or just really in a situation going, hey, at the end of the month, I'm having a hard time because I spend more than I need to be, they'll basically take cash, put it in an envelope. And I'm just making up numbers. If you're eating out money for the month is $20 or $40, that's what goes in that envelope. And literally at the end of the month, if you spend it all, you don't have any left, or if you're in the middle of the month, you spend it all, you're not going to pull any more money to go eat out. And that's a way to really create a discipline. And some people don't like keeping cash in their house, so they've even used Monopoly money, and then they'll go take the real money out of use their debit card or something like that. So that is a real easy way to do it. And everybody does it differently. I don't like that model, so we don't use that model in our house. So I always tell people, I'm like, come up with what works for you. I'm 47 years old. I still like writing things down. So my budget is actually on a piece of paper. It's not in a computer. That's okay if that's not how you like to do things. I don't really care. I don't think there's a magical formula. It's just make sure you have a plan in place on how you're going to manage your finances. And so I actually met with a couple through our church. I guess it was about 2 weeks ago, and just kind of give you how everybody struggles in different ways. The husband had a really bad spending habit. He actually would use debit cards and credit cards, and the wife wasn't in that position. And we actually worked through in about an hour how to develop a plan for them. And ultimately for him, it was, you're no longer going to have a debit card or credit cards if you ultimately want to get to the goal that you say you do. And so you have to be very specific sometimes and honest with yourself to go, hey, what are my weaknesses? Is it Starbucks? Mine would be ice cream. Sometimes I like to play too much golf, different things like that. And I'm like, I need to do better at that. So that's where I'd tell you, if the rest of the stuff we're going to talk about really doesn't come into play as much as knowing how much money you have coming in and making sure you're staying within those parameters on a monthly basis. Questions on any of that?
Someone did put a comment, a little acronym, YNAB, you need a budget. It's a really helpful app. It's from Sarah on the chat.
Oh, there it is. Gotcha. I was pulling that up too. Thank you for sharing that. I'm trying to figure out if you ever see me like dumbfounded on this, it's because I'm trying to figure out something technology. My volume's very low. All right, there we go. Okay, so income sources is kind of the next. Again, I'm not going to read to you guys. So those are different sources that can come in. And the only thing I'll speak to that is make sure you understand the taxation of each of those. Okay. And I'm not a CPA, but I deal a lot in that, whether it be dividends or even child support, alimony, stuff like it. Just understand what could be taxable and not, so that you're not spending every dime of it and realizing, I'm going to actually have to pay some taxes on this and not have money either taken out to do so, or not having some in the bank to kind of make sure you're there in case you do need to owe the government a couple $100 or something. Because that's the other thing we hadn't got to on the spending plan, is really going back to Dave Ramsey and Larry Burkett. Larry Burkett's dad, so you won't hear him as much, but in my opinion, he was the better of the two for the years he was doing that. But you'll usually have somewhere between about 3 to 5 times your monthly income set aside in cash. And that's a great comment generically, but not everybody can do that. So my argument to you is, when you're creating a spending plan, go ahead and try your best to create yourself a cash account. So some money going into cash every month, so that you do have money there, even if it's only $100. It's better than not having it, because there will be emergencies come up, whether it's just life, whether it's children or whatever. And that is a very big key. And so I'll tell each of you, if that's a goal of yours and you don't have it, go ahead and start trying to build that monthly. And again, it's the same as investing, we'll talk about later. I don't care if all you can do is $25 a month, put $25 back a month and do it that way. So that's a big thing, because we all have those emergencies that will pop up. And like today, I had to take my wife's fan in because something was messed up. Well, what happens every time you take it to the dealership? It's 500. I mean, it's almost like breathing to them, right? They don't know another number. It's $500. Well, what about, could it be 4? No, it's 5 every time. So anyway, that hit me today, and it was one of those, you're like, well, thanks a lot. But you can handle it a little bit easier if you do have a little bit of cash set aside. So that is definitely something to encourage each of you to be thinking through. Questions? Any more comments? All right, perfect. So just to give you an idea too, I just use personal stories to, Teresa's known me for a long time, but when I first got out of college, I was a teacher and a coach. And so I lived off of a teacher's salary for over 2 years. And so, I enjoyed it. It was a great time working with kids, but I knew I couldn't stay inside all day for 30 plus years. It's hard enough for me to sit in this chair this long. So I always had a financial background and enjoyed it. And so that's why I got into that. But I say that to say this is, sometimes it seems, I know as a teacher, I was like, shoot, how am I going to pay the bills each month? And I had to do what I'm just telling you, is really dig down in my budget and come up with some ideas as far as how to save goes. So just kind of keep that in mind. All right. So checking accounts, stuff like that, biggest thing there is, right now, there's no magic formula for anything in cash. You're not going to make a lot off of it. And my biggest thing is if you like doing things electronically on checking accounts now, literally you can track all your spending, whether it be debit cards. I personally, because it's not a problem for me, I put everything monthly on a credit card, because my wife's family lives in Idaho and we're able to use the points to travel. But I pay my credit card bill off weekly, because I just use it just like it's a debit card. That works for me. It may not work for others because they struggle with credit cards. I do not. And so checking accounts the same way. It really helps you track kind of what your spending is. So if you're wrapping your arms right now around, hey, how can I even come up with a budget, because I don't even know kind of where my money's going to, go back to your bank electronically and you can see where all your money's flowing out of, or if you do have a credit card, the same thing, and really start tracking down from January 1. And that's rough. I'd tell you to go back maybe to March, April, May of last year, because that's normal months. You know, the winter time and Christmas, normally we all spend more just because of Christmas. So I would take more normal months and kind of track and go, yeah, I live off and need to make sure I'm making X amount of money a month, and whatever's excess obviously goes to saving or debt. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. And say their savings account. I mean, right now it's laughable between checking and savings. You're not going to make any more money. We're basically all paying the banks to hold our money right now because the interest rates are so low. But either one of those, and I do like this. I'm a very anal person. When it comes to money, I have to be. I know what's in my checking account to the penny. So some people will be like, "Oh, I balance it within $100." I don't like that. That doesn't make sense to me. If you're going to balance it to the penny, because then you know it's exactly balanced. But doing something other than nothing is better. I'm just telling you, encourage you. I would think about doing it to the penny, and that way you know exactly what you're dealing with. And it's you taking ownership of it, going, I'm going to be over this money, not let the money be over me. And so those are just little things that I like to do. And I will tell you, 23 years of doing financial planning and investment planning for people, the number one thing that I see with trends for people that actually have done a good job of building wealth, and don't think that means you have to have $1 million to build wealth, right? I've got several school teachers that have done a good job. All it is they're managing what they have and being good stewards with it. And over time, it adds up to where they can live whatever lifestyle they want to live, right? So you don't have to be a millionaire to retire and go, hey, I get to do what I want to do. You just got to manage your money and debt load and do what you can do to try to make sure you got a starting point. So again, if some of you are on this going, hey, I just need a starting point, that's kind of what we're focused on tonight. And if you look 20 years out, that's a little overwhelming. So let's just start with today and what we can do better starting next week. Okay. All right. So talk about debt. You can see there's all kinds of debt. I would say the number one there that I see that gets most people in trouble is credit card debt. And it's because credit cards have such high interest rates attached to them once you get in debt and you're not able to pay those back pay them off monthly. And so that's where you got to be real careful on that. So when I started my business, I took on some debt, okay, because I didn't have any other way to start a business. And so what I did is I took credit cards that offered 0% interest for 6 months to 12 months. And if I had any debt, I would stick it on there. And that give me 6 to 12 months to pay that off at 0% interest. Now, what happens after that 6 month or 12 month is the rate goes up to 25%. So about month number 4 or month number 10, I'd start looking for another credit card that offered the same thing, and I'd roll the debt over to the new one. But you have to close the old one. So there's a little bit of work there. But it's a real good way as an option, even if you have credit card debt that you're like, I don't know how I'm going to pay $5,000 back. If you can find the offer of 0%, I got one in the mail today. I'm not using it. Praise the Lord, I don't need to. But if I did, that's how I would look at paying off some credit card debt if that's an option for you. So, questions to that, because some people that kind of blows their mind when I start talking about how to manage that. It's not that hard to manage. You just have to be very particular on making sure you have a next card in place or you've paid it off by that 6 to 12 month window, depending on the type of card you receive. Everybody good? No questions? And I would say, school loans, we'll go to mortgage loans, and those are the easiest to talk about. School loans and any type of auto loans, kind of fall into that mortgage as well, but school loans have a little bit lower rates. And I would tell you there's times you can roll those over into a 0% offering as well. And so that's where I would tell you if you have, I mean, I'll be honest, I've had clients that have had 100,000 or more in student loans and are like, well, how in the world can we ever pay these off? We start working out a plan, and it may take 5 years, it may take 10, whatever, but at least we put a plan in place to go, this is how it's going to get done. Because here's the deal. No debt's ever going to get paid off if you don't have a plan in place to get it paid off. And that's the only hope we have to take ownership of getting out of debt when that happens. And I'm not talking about mortgage. I'm talking about any type of credit cards, things like that, that we've added to our expenses at some point. Because really auto loans and mortgage loans are just a way of life. Now, obviously you don't want to get something that's so beyond your means you can't pay it back, or if you have a small hiccup in life that you can't do anything there either. Right now, crazy enough, to have a mortgage is sometimes cheaper than actually renting right now due to the environment of real estate. So there are a lot of people right now that have gotten homes that are like, hey, it's just cheaper to own a home, and get a loan than it is for me to try to rent right now. And so the biggest thing, oh, gotcha. Thank you, Tammy. The bulk of this is at the beginning, so I'll go through some of this quicker. But debt is the number one thing that keeps people from ever retiring. So I'll just tell you that way. It's one of those that the more you manage that, the more options you have, not only now, but as you get 10, 15, 20 years down the road, because we just can't take a lot of debt into either retirement or that phase or season of life because we won't have enough guaranteed income to be able to pay that debt. So that's where, and I do think Social Security will be here. That's another topic, but it really is something that I'll tell each of you to try to wrap your arms around and go, okay, this is what we're going to try to do to get it paid off. And then auto loans, I'll tell you this, and then we'll move on, because again, there's different things here that don't take as much time. Auto loans, you always use me as an example because I don't care to share what I do. I'm always looking for free money. So I'll always pay some down on an auto, but if I'm getting an auto and they offer 0% financing, I will finance that vehicle at 0%. And if it's for 3 or 5 years, I'll go ahead and max it out, but I go ahead and set a plan in place to have it paid off in 2 to 3 years. So if the payment's $200, I'll do everything I can to double that and make sure that I'm paying it off in a much quicker time than even the 3 to 5 years. If you can't do that, that's okay. Just make sure you pay it off in that 3 to 5 years. The problems that I see is people will get a new loan or an auto and they'll go, oh, that sounds good at 0%, but I'm going to use that money somewhere else. And then once that 0% ends, they're going to stick it to you. So you can find yourself in a very bad situation. So that's the biggest thing I see is usually credit card debt and auto loans are those that people at some point have gotten themselves a little overextended and they've got to catch up at some point. Any questions on any of that? All right, perfect. So one of the things, I'm going to skip living expenses and that kind of stuff.
No, thank you.
Go ahead. All right. So tax returns. A lot of people use tax returns as kind of like a vacation fund. Okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I will tell you that if the government's keeping $4,000 to $5,000 of your money throughout the year, and how do you know that? If you're getting, I'll say this, if you get more than about probably $500 back in a refund, you need to probably address how much you're having taken out for taxes because you're letting the government keep too much of your money throughout the year. If that's a forced savings for you, okay, that might work, but make sure you're using it to either pay off debt or as a cash account, whatever might do it, not to go take a trip every year to Disney World. just because you're getting a big lump sum. Again, you got to understand the government's going to use every extra penny it can of yours if you let them. So if you do get a huge lump sum or refund, excuse me, you might just want to think through of, hey, maybe I need to have more taxes taken out throughout the year. And obviously you'll have more money coming to you instead of it going to the government. And with that said, when you start looking at retirement, is if you work for an employer, you'll have a 401k as an option in most cases. Some people have a SEP, SEP, or a simple plan. Those are different things. Here's what I'll tell you on any plan that's offered through your employer. If they will match, I'm making up numbers, but usually it's 3 to 4% of what you put into it, I would encourage you to try to make sure you're maximizing it out. So what does that mean? If the employer says, hey, we'll match 100% up to 3%, that means if you put in 3%, they're going to put in 3%. So you actually get a total of 6. But if you only put 1% in, they're only going to match 1%. So you're leaving money on the table. So if your budget allows you to, if an employer offers a matching program, I highly encourage you to do as much as you possibly can. And if you can do up to the match, 100% of that, it pays huge dividends. And I don't care if all you can save is $25 a month. Start somewhere. Okay. It doesn't have to be you wait until you can do $100 a month or 8% of your income. No, start where you can. And a good goal is to at least get up to where the employer is matching you 100%.
I'm sorry, that's for towards retirement?
Correct.
Or, okay, making sure.
Yeah, and Sarah, that would be, or anyone else wondering, that would be basically a benefit from your employer that gives you an option for saving for retirement. Okay, so a little bit further down the road is Social Security. I kind of touched on that. I think we'll all get it. It's just going to be, we'll get it pushed back some years. So that's why I do believe, and you'll hear me, save as much as you can for retirement because we're all going to need it. I don't have a pension either. So that's my dad, I'll share my dad's story. Mom and dad, he retired at 56 and he's 76. The dude's been retired 20 years now, but he had a pension because he worked for a company for 34 years. I think he started when he was 12. I'm kidding, by the way. But saying that, he had about 80% of his income provided for him through that pension. So he was able to retire at a very young age and has done really well because of that. Our generations are not going to experience that. So with that said, it's pretty much on our shoulders. I do think Social Security will be a supplement for us, but we've got to make sure we're taking care of saving for ourselves and obviously for our kids and for our families down the road.
Lee, we have a question.
Yes.
Can you speak to what they should keep on file to get ready for tax time?
To get ready for what?
To keep on file to be ready for tax time.
Okay. So in what area? Just everything?
Just in general. Yeah.
Okay. So great question. If you do have a retirement plan, okay, so my broker dealer's Ameriprise. So we send every year, our clients get their tax documents sent to them both. They get them mailed and they can do electronic. So that's where you'll get those documents to be able to provide either if you do your taxes yourself or to your CPA. And so that's easy. You just take it, you hand it to them, and it pretty much works out that way. Anything else, such as interest paid on mortgage payments, or as far as loans or any type of loans like that, you will get those documents from that entity. If it's Wells Fargo that holds your mortgage or Home Federal, you'll get that as well. So that is definitely something you want to have because you can deduct that interest. And the same goes with like savings accounts or things like that you have at your bank. You'll get a 1099 off of those as well. I'm looking on here because we hadn't got to some of the other income that you would have coming in and documents. So just so you know, my story with our kids. So one of the children that we adopted was a severe case. Her mom actually tried to suffocate her. And so that's how she got into foster care. And when we went to adopt her and her biological brother, we didn't know it, but she gets a monthly check from the state is the easiest way to say it. And so we have documentation we have to keep every year on that because it is tax free. So moving over to for you guys on the next page talking about healthcare assistance, you may receive some SSI or SSDI. If that's the case, you know, that documentation needs to go with you at tax planning time because that is a form of tax-free income. And all you got to have is the documents to prove that. And so that's very important, as well as anything to do with medical or medical expenses, things like that. If you can itemize, that helps. I can itemize a lot of stuff because I'm a business owner, but you may just use a standard deduction, which is just saying, hey, I'm gonna get the most I can get to write off, and that's fine. You don't have to have as much documentation, but keep any of that end of the year stuff that you get about January to February on anything to do with retirement accounts, savings accounts, healthcare accounts, any type of SSI, SSDI, and that way it just covers your tail with the IRS when you do file each year. Do I need to add anything to that? Any more questions on that? All right, perfect. If you have, it's not on here, but like health savings accounts at your employer, or if you through your any type of additional insurance, you have that as well. That's another thing that you need to really keep good documentation of as well, because that helps you with your tax planning documents also. And you look at dental and vision, that goes kind of with health savings accounts as well. And it's just, you just got to prove where that money was used. And it's very easy actually. All right. So that covers most everything I wanted to go over, because I know we're all still pretty much dealing with younger children unless I'm missing something. So does anybody have any questions? Because we got about 4 to 5 minutes based off whose clock we're looking at. Oh, when you had me on there, I couldn't see the question. So I apologize. You put that in there and I didn't see it.
I did want to add, there's a category on there that says disability related expenses.
Yes.
That a lot of times that can really throw a person's budget off because of that. I don't know if all of the families know that there are some things that they can apply for that are resources. One is the Katie Beckett law, that you have to go through TennCare application first, and they'll see if you qualify for TennCare. If you don't, then they will add the Katie Beckett part that you can apply for. That gives money per year for families with children with disabilities to help with those expenses. Another resource is called Family Support, and there is an intake form for that you could get from your TEIS person, and that gives monies per year also based on county, and it is not age specific, so it will continue past the age of 3. But it has to be applied for every year for family support.
Thank you for saying that, because, you know, that takes me back to something I had in my notes, but I missed. My wife and I, her name's Nicole, by the way, when we first went down fostering, we really didn't know who was there to help us. And once we kind of figured out who actually can help us in what situations, there's agencies that do a really good job. And sometimes case managers do better than other ones, but just being honest, but we ended up finding a really good support group, but we had to ask some questions sometimes or dig in a little bit. So what you just said there is huge, to be able to go, hey, here's some resources that you may or may not be aware of. But the more questions we asked, it was like, oh, good, that's already in place. We just didn't know. And again, we went through foster care classes and stuff, and they did pretty good. But until you're in the thick of it, you have no idea what you're doing. And at least that's the experience we had. And so that's something I would say to everybody. Make sure you have a very clear understanding of what resources are there to help you. And you have a great support group in these ladies already. So make sure you're maximizing that. Anybody want to add anything else, or are we done? Okay, so here's how I'll end it, because I like action items. I don't want you to take an hour of your life. It's too valuable to not get something. So I hope you found value in what we talked about. But if some of what we talked about was overwhelming, the biggest action item I'll encourage you to take away and to think through tonight, and as you get into the weekend, to go, okay, this is something I can do, is figure out how you're going to get organized on all the paperwork that you're dealing with, because that will help you. Just mental health alone, I know for me, that's a big deal. And I was a better parent to all of my kids in our home once we figure that out. And then the second thing I'll tell you is, if you don't have a budget in place and you're like, okay, I've got to get control of my spending or just understand how to spend better, start there. So come up with what works for you on getting organized, whether it's a 3-ring binder or whatever, or a scanner where you can scan it all in. Everybody's different. Start there, and then also get your arms wrapped around what your budget is and what you want it to, how you're going to maximize it. And again, I don't care how you do it, on paper or electronically. I think those are two things. If you have your arms around those organized wise, the rest of this will fall in place. But I know until we did it, and even talking about it, just, man, it takes me to a dark place, because we were overwhelmed, and nobody handles life well when we're overwhelmed. So I'll definitely be praying for you guys, and anything I can do to help further. But those are the two takeaways I would tell you to take tonight and go, all right, I think we can do that.
Lee, there is another question from Brittany.
Yep.
Yes.
Go ahead,
Brittany had a
Brittany.
hand up.
How important would you say it is to have a will? And I have never heard of a special needs trust before.
So the will's huge. Thank you for asking that. I skipped that, and I apologize. Right now, what I would tell everybody needs, okay, is at least a will that says, hey, if something happens to me, here's where all my stuff goes first. And because you have younger children, my oldest is 16. So we go 16, 13, 10, and 8. And I had to be very specific in my will, because let me tell you something, there's not many people out there that want to take 4 kids if I die and my wife does, right? So, I mean, I don't blame them. There's times I want to kick them out in the yard and be done with them too. But we had to be very specific on who is going to care for our children. And so what we did is we actually asked a friend of mine and his wife that I've known since 3rd grade. And my sister got her feelings hurt because it wasn't her, but she's married now, but she was single with no kids for up until, what is she? She's 49. So up until 48. She didn't even know what she would be getting into if she got 4 kids. So my point is, everybody here needs to think through at least putting a will in place saying, hey, here's kind of how we want things to roll if something happens, but also more importantly, who is going to care for our children if we're not here to do so.
Sarah, did you have a question?
Yes, I was wondering, this is different, maybe unrelated.
how long would you recommend keeping like paid medical bills?
I don't think you
On
need,
file?
say 2 to 3 years tops. I mean, and that's probably being extreme.
Okay. So those don't necessarily need they might need a place in the big binder
Yes. And,
just for that
and
amount of time.
I'll be honest with you, do I do it? No. So once I pay them, I throw them in the trash, I'm done with them. But the downside of that, what if they came back and said I didn't pay my bill? I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot. So I'd say a year, 2 years tops. But again, now through computers, you can pretty much track all your payments at the same time. So you may not need a hard copy, but just make sure through your banking, you have that as well. And I didn't answer your complete question, is with a special needs trust. Not everybody needs one. So if you feel like you've got a case that you're like, hey, this may apply, email Teresa or whoever and just say, hey, Lee, they want a little bit more information about that. I would say 95% of people don't need one, but there are cases where you may go, and here's one, what would be an example? You're going to get an inheritance from your family, whether they want to give it to you during their lifetime or at death. And it's predominantly to go for the care of that child, okay, or children. If that's the case, you may need to set up a trust to make sure that everything's followed through if something happened to you or even during your lifetime, to make sure you stay within the guidelines of how that money is to be used. So that's an easy way to make sure of that. But again, there's very few cases where you really have to go through the expense of setting that up.
Hey, Lee, if
Yes.
somebody has a question as they're going through materials after this Zoom video, do they have a way to ask that to you before the next meeting that we have in March?
Absolutely. So if you'll type it in hey, how about I do that? See, I almost just asked you to. So I am going to type in, I act like my fingers are broke or I don't even know anything about technology. All right, let me make sure that went through right. Okay, so there's my email address, and anyone is free to send me an email and say, hey, here's a question I have. And I'm pretty quick at getting back with them right now. I will be honest. I'm extremely busy just because everybody's freaked out with what's going on in the world events right now. So I'm on the phone a lot just because we be very proactive with our clients. But if I don't get with you when you first send it, I usually answer every email before I go home, just because I believe if somebody asks me a question, they deserve an answer that day. So by all means, use that email address and I'll get with you.
Good. Thank you, Lee, for that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? We are meeting again on March 21st, and that is a different night than what we typically are meeting. That's a Monday night at 7 o'clock. And with the next topic is what? Does anybody know what the next one is?
It's on spending.
Spending. Okay.
Correct.
And I did want to point out, I put it in the chat also, that in your notebooks that you received is a script of the videos. The videos are at the beginning of each tab. And then those videos are also available on our website if you need to watch it again. Okay. And those will be under the training tab. The Zoom recording of tonight's session will also be available under the training tab on our website. So thank you for joining us. We appreciate it, Lee. Thank you so much. And Claudia, thank you for your help tonight with interpreting.
Thank you, gang. Have a good night.
We'll see you next time. Bye, Claudia. So, oh, well, I was gonna ask her if she felt like, Claudia, do you feel like everything went okay from your end? You switch to English so we can hear you.
I can hear her.
I can't hear her yet.
I can hear her. I can hardly hear you again, Robin.
That's weird, isn't it? So
There you go,
you're,
now I hear you.
you'll have to tell me what she's saying because I can't hear what she's saying.
You say bye to Candelaria.
Okay. Good. That's encouraging.
Yeah. She said, it was nice to participate. Thank you for inviting me very much. Sorry, Claudia, I'm interpreting while you're hearing me, but Robin couldn't hear you.
That was Candelaria who said that.
No, that was Claudia that said that.
Claudia. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Right, she cannot hear her, so. Yeah.
Okay.
No, as far as I know, Robin, she's saying, is there anything she needs to report or anything from tonight or anything we need from her tonight? Okay.
No, no. I will be sending you in the mail.
She'll
Okay.
send it in the mail.
I don't understand why I can't hear her. If she switches to English.
Thank you. So have a good night. Just looking forward to see us in March.
Good.
Thank you.
All right. Tammy,
Yay.
you might want to, oh, I forgot to stop the recording.
Oh.
So I think
I'm trying to figure out stopping that now.